Think about the person you were before a specific love entered your life. Not the love you have now, the one that changed you. The one that reorganized something fundamental in the interior, the way you understood yourself, the way you moved through the world, the things you needed and feared and reached for. The love that, when it arrived, made the person you had been before it seem like a rougher, less inhabited version of yourself. Now think about what happened after. Whether the love stayed or ended, you did not go back. The person you were before it is not available anymore. The reorganization was permanent. The love changed you and then it left you there, in the changed version, carrying everything it produced, whether the person is still beside you or not. You are a different person because of a love that may no longer exist. And no one prepared you for that. Søren Kierkegaard was a Danish philosopher born in Copenhagen in 1813. He is not the most famous philosopher. He is not the easiest, but he understood something about love that almost no philosopher before or since has articulated with the same precision and the same honesty. He understood that love is not primarily something that happens between two people. It is something that happens to the self, that the encounter with another person, genuine encounter, the kind that reaches past the surface into the actual interior, does not simply add something to who you are. It fundamentally alters the structure of the self. It rewires the interior at a level deeper than habit or preference or the accumulated choices of a life. And once that rewiring has happened, it does not unhappen. The love may end, the person may leave, or you may leave, or time and circumstance may do what time and circumstance do. But the self that was altered by the love does not revert to the version that existed before. You are changed, and you are left there, in the changed version, for the rest of your life. Kierkegaard spent his entire philosophical career circling this insight. And he spent it circling one specific woman. Her name was Regina Olsen, and she is the key to everything. He met her in 1837. He was 24. She was 14. The meeting was unremarkable, a social occasion in Copenhagen, the kind of gathering that the educated middle class of that era attended regularly. He noticed her. He did not pursue it. He was already, by his mid-20s, a complicated person, deeply intelligent, prone to melancholy, carrying the specific weight of a religious upbringing that had given him both a rich interior life and a profound sense of guilt that he would spend decades trying to understand. He saw her again over the following years, and something accumulated. By 1840, when she was 17 and he was 27, he began courting her seriously. He proposed, she accepted. They were engaged. And then something happened in Kierkegaard that he spent the rest of his life trying to explain. He became convinced that he could not marry her. Not because he had stopped loving her. He had not. The letters and journals make this clear with a specificity that is almost painful to read. He loved her, genuinely, with the full weight of his unusual, complicated, melancholy interior. He loved her in 1840, when he proposed, and he loved her in 1841 when he broke the engagement, and he loved her in his particular and entirely private way until the day he died in 1855. But he broke the engagement. He engineered the break deliberately and carefully, making himself appear cold, making himself appear unworthy, behaving in ways designed to make Regina want to end it rather than simply telling her the truth. He performed the villain in his own story so that she could be free of him without the burden of having been abandoned. Why? This is the question that drives the philosophy. He gave several reasons at different times, in journals and letters, and in the philosophical works themselves, many of which were addressed, in coded and indirect ways, to Regina. He said he was too melancholy, too interior, that the life he needed to live, the solitary, unencumbered, entirely self-directed life of a thinker, was incompatible with marriage, that he would make her miserable, that he was protecting her. Some of this was probably true. Some of it was probably the story he needed to tell himself in order to live with what he had done. What is clear is this. The breaking of the engagement with Regina Olsen was the central event of Kierkegaard's life. It was the wound around which his entire philosophy organized itself. Every major work he produced in the 14 years between the broken engagement, and his death at 42 was, in some way, about this, about love, about the self that love transforms, about what it means to love someone completely and leave them anyway, about what remains in the self after the love has done its work. He signed many of his books with pseudonyms, different voices, different perspectives, different philosophical positions explored from the inside. But the subject was always the same, Regina, and what she had done to him by being loved. Here is what Kierkegaard understood about love, that most people discover only in retrospect, only after the love has already done its work. Love is not an addition to the self. This is how we tend to think about it, as something that comes into a life that was already formed and complete and adds a dimension to it, a companion, a comfort, an enhancement of the life that was already there. And when it ends, when the love is over, by choice or circumstance or the slow erosion of time, the self returns to what it was before, perhaps slightly diminished, perhaps slightly wiser, but fundamentally the same self that existed before the love arrived. This is wrong. Kierkegaard understood that genuine love, the kind that reaches past the surface, past the performed self, past the carefully managed presentation of who you are into the actual interior, does not add to the self. It reveals it, and in revealing it, it changes it permanently. Think about what happens in the early stages of a love that is real. Not the performed version, not the version of yourself you present at the beginning, when you're still managing how you appear, still curating the impression, still showing the aspects of your interior that are most likely to produce the response you need, the later version, the version where the management has loosened and the actual self has begun to emerge. In that emergence, in the specific vulnerability of being seen by someone who is paying full attention, something is revealed that ordinary life does not reveal. Fears that you had not fully acknowledged, needs that you had not fully named, capacities for feeling that you had not previously known you possessed, the full dimensionality of an interior that the ordinary transactions of daily life never require you to fully inhabit. The beloved sees this, and in being seen in the specific, terrifying, irreversible experience of being genuinely known by another person, the self that is being seen becomes more real to itself. This is Kierkegaard's central insight. The self is not a fixed thing that love encounters. The self is something that love in part produces. Not from nothing. The raw material was always there, but the encounter with another person who sees you fully is what brings certain dimensions of the self into existence in a way that they did not exist before. You become more yourself through being loved, and that more yourself version does not disappear when the love ends. It is what you are left with. He wrote in Either Or, one of his major works, published in 1843, 2 years after the broken engagement, about the person who has loved genuinely and then lost the love, not through death. Through the ordinary, unglamorous, entirely human endings that love sometimes makes, he wrote about what that person carries. Not the memory of the beloved, though that is present too. Not the grief of the loss, though that is real. Something more structural than either of those. The changed self, the version of the interior that the love produced and that the ending of the love does not unproduce. The fears that were named are still named. The needs that were acknowledged are still acknowledged. The capacities for feeling that the love brought into existence are still there, now without the person who called them into existence, without the relationship that gave them their original expression, but present, real. Part of the self in a way they were not before. You are left with yourself. The version of yourself the love made. And you must live from that version now. Whether you chose it or not, Regina Olsen did not wait for Kierkegaard. This matters. She mourned the engagement. By all accounts, she was genuinely devastated. She had loved him. The strange, brilliant, melancholy man who had pursued her and proposed and then inexplicably withdrawn. She did not understand why. He did not tell her. He performed the villain and left her with the confusion of someone who has been left without a reason they can hold on to. But she did not remain in the loss. Within a few years, she had accepted the proposal of Fritz Schlegel, a man who had become the governor of the Danish West Indies a stable and respectable choice, the kind of love that is not organized around a wound. She married him. She had a good life. She outlived Kierkegaard by nearly 50 years, dying in 1904 at the age of 80. And Kierkegaard, he stayed in Copenhagen, in the same city as Regina, encountering her occasionally, at church, on the street, in the small social world of a small city, watching her live the life he had freed her from, watching her become the wife, and eventually the governor's consort, and eventually the old woman he had made possible by leaving. He never married. He continued writing the pseudonymous works, the journals, the philosophical explorations of love and the self, and what it means to choose and what it means to live with a choice you have made that cannot be unmade. And in the journals, the private ones, the ones not intended for publication, he wrote about Regina constantly, not obsessively, not in the way of someone who cannot move forward, in the way of someone who is trying to understand what happened, what the love was, what it did, what it means that you can love someone completely and leave them and continue loving them after the leaving, in a form that is no longer about them, but about what they revealed in you. He wrote, "If I had had faith, I would have stayed with Regina." This line has been analysed endlessly by Kierkegaard scholars. What does he mean by faith? What is the faith that would have allowed him to stay? But underneath the theology, underneath the specifically Kierkegaardian vocabulary of faith and the self and the absolute, is something simpler and more personal. He is saying, I was not ready to be the person she saw. The love revealed a self he was not yet capable of inhabiting fully. A version of himself that needed another person, that was dependent, that was changed by the encounter in ways that frightened him. A self that the life he had chosen, the solitary, interior, entirely self-directed life of the thinker, could not accommodate. And so he left. Not because the love was insufficient, because he was not yet equal to what the love had made of him. There is a specific kind of loss that is not about the person. Most accounts of heartbreak focus on the person, the missing of them, the grief for their presence, their specific qualities, the way the world feels different without them in it. This is real. This is its own legitimate suffering. But Kierkegaard is pointing at something else, the loss of the self you were before, because the self you were before was less, was smaller, was a rougher, less inhabited, less fully dimensioned version of what you became through the love. And you cannot go back to that version. The encounter happened, the revealing happened. The interior that the love called into existence is now your interior. And sometimes this is the thing that is hardest to say. The loss of that former self is its own grief, not because the former self was better. It was not. It was less. But it was simpler. It did not know what it now knows. It did not feel what it now feels. It was not yet capable of the specific, acute, entirely unglamorous vulnerability that the love produced. And that vulnerability, the capacity to be fully seen, to be genuinely known, to need another person in a way that the self before the love did not know how to need, that capacity does not disappear. When the love ends, it remains as a kind of openness, a wound that is also a door. The self that was changed by the love is now capable of being changed again by the next love, by the next genuine encounter, by the next person who reaches past the surface into the actual interior and reveals another dimension of what you are. This is what Kierkegaard means when he writes about love as the education of the self, not instruction, transformation. The self does not learn from love the way it learns from a book or a teacher or the accumulated experience of a life lived carefully. It is changed at a level deeper than learning, reorganized. The interior restructured around new knowledge of itself that only the encounter with genuine love can produce. And once reorganized, it cannot be unreorganized. You are left there, in the changed version for the rest of your life. I want to bring this into your life now. Think about the love that changed you most significantly, not necessarily the longest, not necessarily the one that ended most painfully, the one that reached furthest into the interior, the one that revealed the most about who you actually are underneath the performed version of yourself. Now think about what that love produced in you that is still present. Not the grief, though the grief may still be present too. The capacities, the things you know about yourself now that you did not know before, the fears that were named, the needs that were acknowledged, the specific ways of being with another person that the love taught you, not as lessons, as transformations. All of that is still yours. The love did not take it with it when it left. It left it in you. This is the insight that Kierkegaard circles in almost everything he wrote after Regina. The love that ends is not simply a loss. It is a permanent addition to the self, not a comfortable addition, not the kind of thing that makes you feel better about the ending. Often it is the opposite. The self that the love produced is the self that now misses the love. The capacity for feeling that the love called into existence is the capacity that now feels the absence of it. The openness that the love created is the openness through which the grief enters. You are more capable of suffering the loss because the love made you more capable of everything, more capable of feeling, of needing, of being present to another person in the full, undefended, entirely vulnerable way that real love requires. And Kierkegaard's question, the one he circled for 14 years in the journals and the pseudonymous works and the private letters that Regina probably never read, is not whether this is worth it. He thought it was clearly worth it. His question was what you do with the changed self, how you live from it honestly, how you inhabit the version of yourself that love produced without either collapsing into grief for the love that produced it, or pretending the transformation didn't happen and trying to return to the simpler version that existed before. He never fully answered this question, or rather the answer he gave is the one that philosophy gives when it is being most honest, not a resolution, a direction. He said, the self that love transforms is closer to the actual self than the self that existed before. The love did not distort you, it revealed you, and the revelation, however painful, however inconvenient, however much it left you with capacities you did not ask for, and needs you were not prepared to have, is movement toward what you actually are, rather than away from it. The changed self is the more real self, and living from that self, fully, without the retreat into the simpler version, without the pretense that the transformation didn't happen, is the only honest response to what love has done. Kierkegaard was not describing this from a comfortable distance. He was describing it from inside it. He broke the engagement with Regina in 1841. He spent the next 14 years, until his death in 1855 at the age of 42, as the changed person the love had made, carrying the transformation, trying to understand it, writing in the indirect and pseudonymous and philosophically demanding way that was his only available honesty about what it means to love someone completely and leave them and remain in the version of yourself that the love produced. He was, in his own description, a person who had been changed by love and left there in the changed version, without Regina, without the simplicity of the self that existed before he loved her, with only the philosophy, the ongoing, never complete, always circling attempt to understand what the love was and what it did and what it means for the self that persists after the beloved is gone. He saw her occasionally. This detail matters more than it might seem. Copenhagen was a small city. Their social worlds overlapped. He would encounter her at church, the Church of Our Lady, where they both worshipped, and sometimes their eyes would meet and sometimes they would not. He watched her become Fritz Schlegel's wife. He watched her move through the social world of the city with the specific, unremarkable dignity of a woman who had mourned a loss and moved forward. She seemed, by all available evidence, to be fine. He was not fine, not in the sense of dysfunction. He continued to write, to think, to produce work of extraordinary depth and originality, but he was not simple, was not at peace, was not the person he might have been if he had never loved her, or if he had loved her and stayed. He was the person the love had made. The melancholy deepened, the interior turned further inward, the philosophy became more urgent and more personal, and more difficult to separate from the wound that was producing it. He wrote in his journal late in his life, She did not make me a poet. She made me the self that could become one. This is as close as he comes to saying it directly. The love did not give him material to write about. It gave him a self capable of the depth the writing required. And that self, the one Regina produced by being loved, is the self that produced everything he is remembered for. The transformation was the gift, the leaving was the cost, and the two cannot be separated. Here is the thing about the self that love leaves behind it is yours now, not the beloved's, not the love's yours. The fears that were named, the needs that were acknowledged, the specific capacities for feeling, and vulnerability and genuine presence with another person that the love produced, these are now part of your interior in the same way that everything else is part of your interior. They belong to you. They are you. And the question Kierkegaard is asking, the one that the philosophy circles without resolving, because some questions are not resolvable, and the honest response to them is to keep asking, is whether you can inhabit that self fully, whether you can live from the changed version rather than against it, whether you can carry the transformation with all its weight, all its inconvenient capacities, all its openness to feeling that you did not ask for and sometimes wish you did not have, and call it yours, not as a burden, as the evidence of having loved. Because here is what Kierkegaard believed, underneath all the philosophy and the pseudonyms and the circling and the journals that Regina probably never read. The self that has been changed by love is not a damaged self. It is a more real self, more real than the simpler version that existed before, more capable, more fully inhabited, more genuinely present to its own experience and to the experience of other people. The transformation is not what the love did to you. It is what the love made of you. And made of you means this is what you are now. This is the interior you are working with. This is the self you bring to everything that comes next, to the next love, if there is one, and to everything else, to the work, to the friendships, to the ordinary days and the significant ones, to the way you move through the world and the things you notice and the depth at which you feel what you feel. All of that, the whole of the life that comes after the love that changed you, is being lived by the self the love produced. And that self is yours, finally, completely, irreversibly yours. He died in Copenhagen on November 11th, 1855. He was 42 years old. He had collapsed on the street in October and never recovered. He was taken to the hospital and lay there for several weeks, declining. Friends came, his brother came, his nephew came. Regina did not come. By then, she was in the Danish West Indies with her husband, the governor. She did not know he was dying until after he was dead. He left her the entirety of his estate in his will, not as a romantic gesture, or not only as that, as an acknowledgement, as the most honest thing he could say at the end, about what the love had been and what it had produced, and what he owed to the encounter with the person who had revealed in him the self capable of everything he had made. She refused the inheritance. She said it belonged to his family, but she kept a ring he had given her during their engagement. She wore it until she died, nearly 50 years later in 1904. Whatever she understood about what he had felt, whatever she made of the philosophy and the journals and the pseudonymous works that were, in their oblique and demanding way, all addressed to her, she kept the ring. Love changes who you are, not metaphorically, structurally, at the level of the interior where the self is organized and the capacities for feeling are held, and the knowledge of what you need and fear and reach for lives, and it leaves you there, in the changed version. Whether the love stays or goes, whether the person is beside you or has been gone for years or decades, whether the love ended well or badly, or in the unglamorous, unresolved, never quite explained way that Kierkegaard engineered with Regina. You are different because of a love that may no longer exist. And the different version, the more real version, the more fully inhabited version, the version that feels more deeply and needs more honestly and is more genuinely present to the actual texture of being alive, that version is what you have to work with now. Kierkegaard spent 14 years trying to understand this. He never fully resolved it. But in the trying, in the journals and the pseudonyms and the philosophy and the will, that left everything to the woman he had loved and left. He did something that is arguably more valuable than resolution. He named it. He gave the transformation a shape. He said, "This is what love does. This is what it leaves. This is the self you are living from now." And the naming, the honest, precise, philosophically serious naming of what love actually is and what it actually produces, is what he left for us. Not consolation, not the promise that it gets easier, just the clarity. You were changed, you are left there, and the changed version of you, with everything it cost, everything it revealed, everything it made possible that the simpler version could not have managed, is real, is yours, is enough.